This is Disclosure Now, a show where we expose the truths that are nefariously hidden from humanity. Today's guest is Gloria Hass. When Gloria was a teenager, she was abducted into MKUltra secret space programs and Black Ops. She is a visionary starseed, natural-born clairvoyant, healer, and has mediumistic abilities. Gloria is an award-winning author who shares her experiences through her work.
Welcome to the show, everybody. It's Arking Ra. I'm here with my co-host, Brian Tseng, the Solar Bee, and we're here with our guest today, Gloria Hass. Am I saying that correctly?
Hass, like the avocado. Yep.
Okay, perfect. And yeah, this is just kind of one of those things. I guess I'll just say how I met Gloria. Basically, Brian was just like, hey, this woman really should be on the show. She has a book. And this is just one of those situations where this is how me and Gloria are meeting, kind of in a public setting, and she's going to talk about, you know, her experiences in MKUltra programs, Black Ops, and as well as with different ETs that she's been in contact with. And yeah, she has books, award-winning books apparently, so I highly recommend you check those out. We have a link in the description. And yeah, just welcome to the show, Gloria. We're so happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me, and feel free to ask questions.
Yeah,
oh, of course.
And maybe I could add in a bit more to introduce Gloria. When Gloria and I found each other through the close-knit community online, through the dumpster fire platform that's Facebook. And, you know, one of the things that I found very quickly in speaking with Gloria is that Gloria, you know, and without you even knowing the people that I was mentioning, your testimony in so many ways is consistent with that of Niara Isley and Niara Tara Isley, I think is how she goes by online. And then also Olivia James, who wrote the book Gray Mouse. And then I was really happy and honored to get to connect the two of you and Olivia. And then in this process, you've been, you know, putting in a lot of the suggestions from folks in the community out there. Write down your testimony, get it into book form, and then now it's out. So congratulations for that. And so I'm so glad that you were able to connect with Arkin so quickly and be here on our show. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And Brian, I thank you for answering questions that I had been seeking for many years, since I was a teenager. Why was I missing my junior year of high school? Went through regression therapy, nothing showed up. You know, after 30 some odd years of therapy, you start wondering what is going on. And then you explained it to me that my memory was wiped.
Yeah, if I may,
Mm-hmm.
in our community, the experiencer community, I think a lot of people aren't best served necessarily by traditional hypnotherapy techniques. It seems like people who do quantum hypnosis healing technique and who also have a good knowledge of the subject matter, because if you know you're a hypnotherapist and you've got someone under and they're talking about time travel and Mars and being in cages with children and Nazis on the moon or whatnot.
Be careful about saying that word on YouTube.
Pardon me, that's right. We're still on that platform.
That's all
so
right.
bad at that.
That's all right. We meant like not seeing. That's
not seeing anything. I do not see.
We're not seeing anything on the moon, but there's stuff there. That's what we meant.
That's right. I'm not seeing self-harm here. Okay, so yeah. But where were we? In terms of right, if they're not equipped to deal with those realities that are realities and write them off and don't take them seriously or think there's some kind of paranoid schizophrenic delusion, then that person obviously is not going to be very well served. And so that's where having encountered now in the last 2 years many experiencers and survivors in this community and seeing what seems to work and what not to work, was very happy to point you in whatever directions that I've been able to, Gloria.
And I appreciate that, because I was able to ask Olivia James a lot of questions, and she was able to explain what I had been through, because I would just write everything down and then get the feedback in return. So I'm not taking anyone's stories and claiming them as my own. It was just, no, this was a secret program that you were in, and this is how it was run. So then that started explaining a lot of other things that I thought were nightmares were actually, and what you had also confirmed, was actually what happened during Black Ops and my Black Ops operations, and that they're still happening.
So there are a couple components there, right word to describe that all, nightmares. And, you know, the things that you were saying to me early on, right off about your own testimony, you know, I'm not going to get too graphic, but the sexual misery programming and the way that they select females on what basis for what uses in terms of like their whole brothel system is horrible. And, you know, people don't make up those kinds of details, and especially the things that you're saying ring so true and consistent with what other survivors of these programs have said over and over. And so there was like no doubt in my mind. It's like, okay, you know, Gloria's been through some of this stuff. You know, what it is remains to be seen. I didn't want to put any words or testimony in your mouth. I just wanted to give you as much perspective from the other people out there with their testimonies that linked up with exactly what you were saying to me. So there you go. And if you want to speak to that, and then the programs too, there are people in our community to this day who are having seemingly memories or recalls of missions that they may be taken on to this day, where they're being used at night to go on missions wherever. And a lot of the things that you're saying to me about the combat type operation sounded very similar to that.
Yes, and the interesting part is I wasn't alone in that situation. I had two female classmates who were there. They remembered everything, only I didn't. And when they spoke to me in my senior year of high school, and even later, I'm like, when did we meet? They go, last year, in junior year. It's like, I don't remember it. And even a woman, we were girls at the time, you know, teenagers, that in my junior year of high school, I supposedly had lunch with every single day. I didn't remember her in my senior year. And all of a sudden she thought I was being a snob and too good for her when I said, I don't remember you. And that hurt me.
Archie had a similar situation there.
Yeah, it's just so horrible how they gaslight us and just make us forget our whole lives, you know? I'm having an emotional reaction to hearing that, because it bothers me that you had to go through the same thing as me. And trying to just compose myself here, because I'm trying to present the information here. I in second grade, so I was a lot younger than I guess when it happened to you, but I had all these memories of I was in the talented and gifted program, is what they told me when they brought me into these Black Ops programs. They called it the talented and gifted program, which is a real program, turns out, that they actually have kids in, but they're able to sort of, I guess it's because it's only a handful of kids that are in that class. So I guess it's easier to explain different memories between like 7 kids and 1 kid and a whole classroom and 1 kid or something. You know what I mean? Like, it's easier for them to cover it up, is my explanation. And I'm not saying that's the reason why, but that's just what I figured, I'm guessing, you know? And yeah, I just remember like from second grade, I went into third grade, and I wasn't in the talented and gifted program anymore, which is this program that, you know, supposed to help kids become like successful in whatever field it would be that they're supposed to succeed in. Like, you know, like for instance, like a kid might be a math whiz to get into something in the field that would match that, or a kid might be, you know, really artistic to make sure that whatever it is. And fortunately, for better or worse, it's a real program which actually seems to help kids. But I had these memories of going to this class, and so I go up to the teacher and I'm like, why am I not in this anymore? And she told me that basically that like she didn't know because she's my new teacher, but then these other kids came up and they're like, you were in TAG program. Like, why are you saying you're in that program when you weren't? And like, I'm like, because I was. Like, you don't remember? Like, I brought up some memories, like Bill Nye the Science Guy, and I think like a trip to a museum or something. And they're like, dude, that never happened. Like, and they just basically just like told me I was crazy. And then that paired with like the fact that I was a silly kid and I would say silly things and have a sense of humor that I guess was just didn't make sense, but at the same time, like I was a kid, like they should understand that. Like they paired that, the fact that I remembered Tag but wasn't in it, with like me making a joke about how I was Jeffrey the Giraffe from Toys R Us, which was just a joke. These kids were like, "Oh, you really think you're Jeffrey the Giraffe?" I'm like, "Yeah," and it was a joke. Like I didn't really think I was thought they got it, but they didn't. And so next thing you know, the psychologist is like, "You remember being in classes you weren't in, and you remember Jeffrey the Giraffe? Like you think you're Jeffrey the Giraffe?" I'm like, "No, I don't think I'm Jeffrey the Giraffe," and I lied. I lied. It probably saved my ass that I lied and told them, "Oh no, I don't remember being in tag. I was just joking about that too," because my mom told me to lie. She told me to lie about the memories of being abducted, lie about all the stuff that happened, because all they would do is say I was crazy and try to take me away from her. That's what she said. So my mom saved my ass in that way. But anyway, so yeah, I didn't mean to take the floor for so long, but our stories really match. And the thing is we're from so far apart, like our generations, like are different generations, but yet you still have these edited memories and stuff like that, and then these experiences with other people that it's confusing and traumatic for you, especially, and then even the other people too. And it's like people just don't understand. Like this doesn't just affect like our lives, like out there, which do exist, and it's really hard for people to understand that it also affects our lives directly here, and not some like obscure memories that are covered up or anything. Like no, they like experiences that have been right there on the surface the whole time. Even when then when you get your memories back too, there's a lot of them that where it's like you look back and you're like, oh, that's why that person treated me so strange, or that's why this happened, all this stuff, and it all clicks. And it's really hard once it comes to that point for you to accept any of these people try to tell you you're crazy, because it's like you and I both have had such profound things that have happened to us in our lives where it's just maybe it was a time in our lives where we were able to go, oh yeah, that is crazy. Yeah, why would I think that? But now there's just too much, right? There's just too many dots that connect. There's just too much like evidence showing that there is something to this. There's so many people talking about it now. And yeah, it's just really profound to me to hear about that. Because like I said, Brian's just kind of introducing me to you. I haven't read your book yet or anything. I definitely will. I'll make sure to get myself a copy, but this is how I'm meeting you. And yeah, like our memories and the things that have happened to us are extremely similar. So yeah, I appreciate you giving that testimony. If you want to like kind of explain a little bit more about just like your past and like what it was like for having these strange discrepancies in what you remember and what other people remember, and just kind of figuring it out. And like now, like what does that look like for you? Like what has that been like emotionally? Like how have you been handling it?
Well, it's interesting that you bring up the TAG program, because when I lived in San Pedro area, I went to Point Furman School, and we had kindergarten, then we had grades like 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, because in the middle of the semester, we would go to a higher, we would be almost like elevated to a higher, like first grade or second grade with everyone. And I remember in 1B, I was reading, and the teacher kept giving me books and everything, and I would take them home, and my mom's like, what's this? I said, well, the teacher gave it to me. And it was like a 5th or 6th grade book for reading. So she went into my classroom, asked my teacher, she said, your daughter is talented and gifted. And my mom said, I only want normal children. And she even denied my brother going into the TAG system as well. And she said, I only want them normal, because she couldn't, with her mental illness, she couldn't stand to have anyone greater than her. Well, then I don't know what happened then we moved to the Mojave Desert, and I started 2nd grade at Quartz Hill Elementary School. And I don't remember if anything, I know I was out my 2nd grade year from strep throat. which went into bleeding kidneys. So I was homeschooled. And that's when we call it tutors. Teachers volunteered, or we would have to pay for the tutors. We were lower income. But I remember in 5th grade, my teacher said, or it was 4th or 5th grade, she said, you have 7th grade reading level. And she started giving me more books. I said, I can't take these home because my mom won't like it. So, of course, the books went into my desk in homeroom. And I was up.
You froze for a moment there, Gloria. We're just gonna kind of let this hiccup work its way out, and then once it, here we're good. All right, so
where did I leave off?
You were talking about Quartz Hill, and you're talking about
right after you moved to the Mojave, and your mom didn't want you guys to be different than her or any greater than her. And you just cut off like last 10, 15 seconds. It wasn't much.
Okay, so when it came to 5th grade, the teacher again approached my mother and she said, no way, my daughter is not going into any talented and gifted program. But these notes were put in my school files. And that way, we know who has access to school files. But that's when I lived in the Mojave Desert. I was like 9 or 10 and had my first UFO experience and saw a dismembered horse. But I don't believe I had any abductions during that time because everything is crystal clear about what I remember from my childhood.
You saw a dismembered horse. I want to interrupt you and explore that for a second.
Okay. It was.
Tell the story of it.
Okay, it was a weekend. I believe it was a Saturday, and my dad and brother were gone. And I felt like I had a gnat in my mouth, but it wasn't, thank goodness. So anyway, they were gone, and I asked my mom if I was bored. And I said, Mom, and she was washing dishes or cleaning up the kitchen. And I remember her in the kitchen area, and she said, why don't you go to the park? And I'm like, well, I don't really want to go to the park and stuff. And she goes, well, why don't you go see if a friend, I'll call her TZ, if she can play. So I went to the phone. She said, no, you walk. She was only half a block from where I lived, country block. And she said, or at the other end of it. And she said, no, go to her house and see if she can, come. Just my mom, I think, wanted some alone time. But as a kid, she was like, no, mom. But anyway, I was walking down and TZ's mom said, yeah, you can go to the park. So as we're walking back, there was a field, there's a house, and then there was a field, which now has 2 houses on it before you get to the house that I lived in on L10. And TZ was saying, do you see that? And I'm thinking, see what? Because I'm just talking away and everything. And she pointed and it looked, and I'm like, what is that? And she got closer. She goes, it's a horse. It's a horse laying on its side. And we thought maybe it was one of Nikki's horses that had gotten out because they had thoroughbreds and quarter horses. And we went up to see it because it was the same color as 2 of her horses. And we got there and it was a half a horse. And it was just like, oh gosh, half the head, half of the full tail, half the body, 1 front leg, 1 back leg. And
wait a second. So Gloria, it wasn't like the horse is like this, like this is a head and this is a tail, and it was cut in half. It was cut like that?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
So
I'm not sure if there's any correlation here, but I'm just going to bring it up just for entertainment purposes and just food for thought. Just
for entertainment purposes, folks. This next.
Basically, I've noticed there's a lot of really strange symbolism with horses when it comes to this abduction stuff and this MKUltra stuff. Like my book is the cover of it is Lucifer. Do you know what Lucifer is, Gloria? It's like this blue horse with like red laser beam eyes. That's at the Denver International Airport. It's like a big statue, which has a weird story behind it. It fell and killed its owner, and pretty much everybody that knows about it thinks it's creepy and weird. And there's this whole connection with that in the cover of the Montauk Project, which has this golden horse on it, which looks the same. And it's got the lightning bolts, which that's the same as the symbol, which is a chess piece horse. I think is the knight. And two lightning bolts behind it. That's the symbol for the psychological operations division of the United States military. So yeah, there's all this weird symbolism with the horse, and what I think it means is that there's this force, this insidious force behind these MKUltra programs, these time lords, if you will, or whatever they are, AI programs sometimes. But you know, a horse is like this magnificent creature that, and I want to bring up. It was actually my partner Kat who pointed this out to me. They're like this magnificent creature that, like, you know, in nature, they can take care of themselves. They can gallop around and be free and live like a really majestic existence, right? But we break them and program them and control them and turn them into essentially like a car, like a vehicle. That's what we've done to them historically, right? These majestic, beautiful creatures. And to me, that's to these people that are behind these operations, that symbolizes breaking the human spirit, breaking the human will to be free and to survive and to be liberated, and controlling humanity. And for some weird reason, that there are these statues of this horses like all over the planet. In future, a potential future where these weird time lords get their way and things end up bizarre, like I've seen it. And I wonder if that horse and traumatized, because that'd be traumatizing, right? Like that probably traumatized you. Like I wonder if
it was, and I was mad. I was mad because after TZ, we got our moms, and you know they came back. The horse had disappeared by the time we had gone in, but there was a outline of dried blood, and they thought we put the blood down. So TZ went home. My mom said, "I'm gonna just give me a few minutes because I need to cool off." She thought it was a stunt. She went in the house, and I felt like I was being watched, and I looked up, and there was a silver saucer. I could see the underside of it, and it was just above the tree line. And I said, "What did this horse ever do to you to deserve this?" And when I looked away and I went back up, the saucer disappeared.
And it's really interesting because apparently a lot of, you know, the ETs, they're telepathic. They might have heard you telepathically what you were saying.
Oh, they knew.
Yeah,
I said it out loud, Brian.
Yeah, they heard her. They knew what she said.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if that wasn't a test.
I wonder if, I wonder what they did that for.
Well, there are a couple of things. Is they might have been monitoring Gloria in the area. They wanted food. You torture the horse, you get the blood products and materials that you want from it, and it also serves a double purpose. If Gloria and their friend sees it, it might be traumatizing to them to some extent, which they like to do to people in the programs, because here in the 3D Matrix world, it tends to kind of dull you, suppress you, traumatize you, cause you to yet further dissociate, and then be more susceptible and prey to the programming.
Well, I didn't fall into that, but after what had happened to me as a toddler, I was sexually abused by my father and his mother. Seeing the horse just made me upset because I loved horses. And it was just like, what happened to have caused this? And when I saw the UFO, it was just like I was mad defending the horse. So I don't know if I was being tested by the reptilians possibly to see how I would be, because we know they're behind the secret space programs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's you know, there's a lot of stuff that happens where you just don't have the context, and it's just like, even if they want, it's very strange. I think Brian's kind of got the best guess as to, I agree with him. Like, it's probably might have something to do with food, and then the double effect of like traumatizing you in a way.
when they found out. It didn't traumatize me, that I was just mad.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, because I knew I was a hybrid, I knew I came into a stillborn baby here as a gray starseed, as a gray benevolent. And after that, I just wanted I wanted off the planet as a human. I wanted to go back, put me on back with the gray benevolence. But
And
after,
can we address that, Gloria?
yes.
We've got some comments here in
Mhm.
our, and I love like having an active chat room.
And by the way,
yeah.
I'm like way too ADHD to pay attention to Gloria and the chat, so I appreciate that so much, Brian, for you doing that.
Yeah, that's why we got co-hosts. It's great. Because Gloria, you're mentioning the benevolent grays, and I too understand that they're benevolent grays, and I might have some starseed lineage of my own with the Asgard grays. Apparently, the movie Paul, it depicts what they look like. They're like grays, but with big human-like eyes and emotions and humor. So they do exist. Because like to answer Dan's question or comment, he was saying something about like grays have no empathy or love. So he's wondering if it was grays. And there are many different types of grays. Many of them tend to be on the non-emotional, less emotional level. It's my understanding. But according to Audrey Walters and others, there are like the Asgard Gray, for example, who are benevolent. They do have emotions.
100%.
They are sympathetic. Yeah. Okay.
100%.
Maybe Arkeem.
And I really don't like
them.
it. Even the reptilians, there's benevolent reptilians.
Mhm.
So it's like it's always a really terrible thing to paint any species with the same
100%.
brush. Which I realized, by the way, and I've got to say this really out loud on my show. I've really done that with the Zahami and the ones that are considered archangels. I'm still struggling to understand it, but I think what I realize is I've painted them all with the same brush, and like some of these Zahami probably wanted what's best for humanity, and unfortunately the nefarious ones of their group got in the way of that. But that's a whole nother story. It's just to reiterate the fact that it's never good to paint any species with the same.
And
same
Arkeem,
brush.
the Jahami being what the certain groups of the Anunnaki, that's how they refer to themselves, right?
Yeah, they're like humanoid looking, and I think Penny Bradley gives the best, really detailed description of them, and also John Whitberg does a pretty good job as well. My memories of them are limited, but I have some memories of a couple interactions with them. So,
But I'm from the Zeta Grays, the benevolent Zeta Grays. I'm not from the other branch. So
you should talk to my partner Kat, because she has some benevolent grays that are involved in her life and that are protecting her and stuff. So you might be connected in some way.
we might be.
Yeah.
And hello to our new guest joining us. Dan is asking, what about hive mind entities, though? Are they just controlled by masters? So then apparently it depends on the groups of grays, because some are more hive mind, and I think a lot of them tend to be more hive mind from what I've heard. But there's also some with more individuated consciousnesses. So I think you've got both, because there's so many out there. I mean, think about it, just here on Earth, how many different cultures and societies we have on this one surface of the planet. Now imagine throwing in, multiple planets and star systems, and they're intermixing, interbreeding, hybridizing, throwing in time travel, being enslaved and hybridized further, and on and on and on. So yeah.
Because I'm individuated minded as well as hive minded, because I can choose to turn it off. But when I go and I relax, that's when the hive mind comes. And that's when I can talk with my extraterrestrial daughter and son at the same time, or, speak with the Galactic Federation and know what's going on that metaphysical plane. So there are times where they will pop in with a message if I need to relay it. So yeah, the hive-minded is something that it took me a while to get to doing the individuated and the hive-minded at the same time. They did give me warning ahead of time, last year, saying you will become more hive-minded, because it was time to expand.
Nice. I mean, that actually sounds kind of reassuring if you're able to tap better in a benevolent, conscious collective.
I am, and I can talk with them at any time I wish. but they do not interrupt the secret space programs. I wish they would.
Yeah.
But
I've
Well,
always wondered about that. You know, why some of these more powerful groups don't interfere and stop it, and it's something that's it always
well,
just bothered me a little bit.
it has something to do with the contract I signed before I came here. I was to come here, experience everything, learn to be a whistleblower, and that is why I'm coming forward and why I've had that experience. And they allow it to continue to happen. That was one of my purposes to come in the
We're
contract.
infiltrators, is what I'm starting to realize.
Yes, I'm an infiltrator.
Yeah, we're infiltrators.
and they encouraged you to write this book as well, did they not?
Actually, it was weird because they did, because I just finished Disclosure from the Galactic Realm, and it was just like I'm done. And then you and I said, good, I'm done with this book and getting it all set up. And then when I was talking with you, Brian, you were urging me to write it down. A friend of mine in New York was like, Gloria, write down this information. No, it wasn't my friend in New York. It was somebody else saying, you need to write down this information. And I'm like, but I'm tired. I don't want to. But you can't. I say, okay, because last time I said no, I ended up with a head injury. And I thought, no, I don't want to have another one. So I worked on my book 6 hours a week just writing. But I remember dictating the information into, actually this book I put on a drive. I didn't run it through my phone. I put it on a flash drive. So I would be in front of the computer sometimes throughout the day, 2 to 3 hours. And it took me 3 weeks to write Abducted into the Secret Space Programs and Black Ops. So, yeah.
So while we're on the topic of that, let's take a jump, because I know, we only, in the narrative, it tends to be, getting through all just the recall and trying to recollect the memories and get all of it. But then earlier in the interview, at the start of this, you kind of mentioned some of the recalls of you're having these very vivid dreams of what seem to be missions and military type operations. Can you describe those, please?
Yes. The recall isn't always about something that happened to me in the past. I remember going through not what I thought were nightmares since I believe I was they started happening in my late 20s to early 30s, and I would have them every night. When I first relocated back to California, I was living with my parents, and my dad would hear me get up in the middle of the night, or my mom was just coming in from work because she's a registered nurse, and see me in the living room. And I would have, of course, the kitchen light would be on, which was just like right across where the living room is, so I could still see it. I didn't want to go back to sleep, and she asked me what was wrong. I said, I'm having these nightmares. And what I was actually first recalling was my training into Black Ops, to where I had to physically kill someone. And what they did was they put either my mom or my dad's face on the person. And because of the anger I had inside and the rage, they would notice that if they would put that, make it look like my parents, I could take out all my rage, which added to the super strength they gave me, and I could kill someone very quickly. And then if they put my brother's face on it, even though he hated me, he's my half brother, he hated me because I knew who my biological father was. He didn't, because my parents kept saying it was my dad, and he didn't look like anyone in the family, but he did look a little bit like my mom's older brother, but not much. And it was like I had a difficult time with that. So they kept his face off of the target and just put my parents in. And then it started being to where I didn't know who I was killing. And then when I realized that I was no longer in training, I was actually killing people on the streets somewhere in the program. And I would remember calling, after I moved out, I would call my mom in the middle of the night. She said, what's wrong? Because she was still awake, unless it was her night off, and she would answer the phone. I said, she goes, you having another one of those nightmares? And I said, yes, I am. And she would talk to me, and if it was on a Friday night or, you know, a Friday, she would say, why don't you come over and stay with Dad and I in the guest bedroom? And that seemed to alleviate some of the nightmares or missions. But through the week, having them in the middle of the night, waking up in a dead sweat, and then having profuse having to sit on the toilet because that was, I guess, a side reaction to killing someone, I would lose control of my bowels, and I still would have to go to work. So all of that was just really weird for me, thinking, what is going on? But my parents seemed to be supportive when I was in my 30s, but my dad's the one who put me into the program to begin with. And
can you talk about
yes.
Because your father, did he sign papers with people? Was it a handshake? Was he a Freemason? Was he in the military? How did that come about?
He, when we were living in the Mojave Desert in Quartz Hill, my dad worked for a big box store. And then he was trying for a promotion for assistant service manager, but that would mean a transfer to Santa Maria, California. He got the job, and I remember him coming home and saying, they asked some really weird questions, like what? How many kids do you have? What ages are they? You know, and they included that in the interview, which my dad never had with RCA when he worked for them in the LA area, or when he first started working for this box store.
I'm going to say this right now, at least in my professional experience, and I was a job recruiter once and blah, blah, blah. I don't ever remember grilling people on their kids and their ages and all that. That was not ever part of the job interview, guys.
Yep. And because of that, they were asking my temperament, and the guy goes, oh, I have a daughter around the same age as yours. Is your daughter outgoing like mine? My dad goes, no, she's withdrawn and more of an introvert. So they already had vetted me, apparently. So my dad got the job, and they told him, we'll call you in a few days. And they did, and he got the job, and he had to report right away. So he reported, and my mom said, we're not going right away, because it was, my brother and I had already started the beginning. It was the beginning of my sophomore year, the beginning of his senior year of high school. She said, I'm not taking them out and they get behind. We will go at the semester break when it's snowing in Quartz Hill and Tehachapi and all of that. So we had 2 months off of school because our Christmas break was half of December. And where we moved to in Santa Maria, they were off practically most of January. So it was so boring after moving, not knowing anyone. And what do you do besides watch TV? So we get through it. But when we first went to Santa Maria, and it was the moving day, and it's like 3 hours away, 3 or 4 hour drive. And after my dad told my mom, called her on the phone before cell phones, said, you guys need to come in your Sunday best, because we're going to have dinner at my supervisor's house. And my mom said, can't we just be in travel clothes? We'll be meeting you at the hotel anyway. We can change there. He said, no, because we have to go right away. I'll pick you up and then we'll go straight over. So by the time after the movers loading everything up, and us waiting for the entire day and then going on the drive, all three of us were exhausted. And by the time we got to the supervisor's house, Mr. Mack, I'll call him, there was no food. And there was a party going on. And Mr. Mack and his wife were drunk, and there were people there in black suits. There was no dinner. All we had to eat and drink was like soda pop and eat potato chips. And my brother and I looked at each other and said, we're hungry. And my mom was trying to be nice and not ruffle feathers. But after an hour, she said, we need to go. We didn't know that we weren't going to be eating dinner. So we really need to get the kids, and I need something to eat as well. But during that hour, my brother and I were in the living room area watching TV. And I was dozing on and off, and we would be awakened whenever my dad and Mr. Mack came through with these men. That's when we had our look over. And I don't know if they took us in, that year, that part of the year, but I do know that starting the summer after my brother moved out, that summer of 72 was just before fall of my junior year started, things started getting hazy. And my dad had to have signed papers, or it might have been a handshake, because I remember that he shook hands with each of the men before we left. And then how do you pay off a 20-year house mortgage in 7 to 9 years? I know with my parents both working. My mom, it took a while for her to get a job as a nurse, but she did. But they didn't make that kind of money to pay off a house. And he had cash to buy a house across the street and turn it into a rental.
So then, Gloria, this I have to ask, was your father any more useful to these assholes than to sell you and your brother into this? Or did they just, once they got you and your brother from your father and mother, they just kind of pushed your father on the side and let him just be on work in the big box store chain and left him alone? Or did they try to move him up in their little order or society? What happened?
I think they tried to move him up because he was coming home drunk every night, because he had to, right after work, go drinking with Mr. Mack and his boss.
That's right. You're saying that was like a requirement. That's another interesting work requirement where like you have to, most bosses after you work, they want maybe come out with a beer with them on a Friday night, but otherwise they want you to go home and get sleep so that you can come back and be a good worker the next day. But in your father's case with Mr. Mack, he was basically required to go drinking with him pretty much after work every day.
And Mr. H, yes. Mr. H had to. I'm not saying their names, because I don't want the families coming back. But yeah, he had to go drinking most nights, and he would come home drunk. And it's a wonder he made it home. He was that drunk. And before that, I don't even remember seeing my dad drink at all. I remember when I was 7, he may have had a beer, and he may have had 2 beers in the refrigerator, and they would last several months. And my mom did,
So they corrupted him, weakened him, and it made it much easier to get to you.
Right. And then in my senior year, what was interesting was my senior year of high school, my brother is gone. And I remember my junior year, them taking me, but I don't know if that bled into my senior year because I was much more alert. And I remember one morning, my dad even bought a Volkswagen Beetle for me to drive to and from school. That was their car, not mine, even though it came from my earnings, I would say. And I can say that now. And I remember accidentally locking the keys in the car. And I went back in the house, and then I went to get my school books and came back out, only I couldn't get in. And my dad was the only one with the extra key. So I went in and called him at work, and he got mad. He was so flipping mad. And he came in one of the repair trucks, because I think his car was getting an oil change at the time, and he just grabbed one of the repair trucks, came to pick me up, and he was so ticked off. But then by the time he got home, he saw the trail of gasoline trailing from underneath the car. And he opened up the door, turned it off, crawled underneath, and saw that the gas line was nicked and something else was wrong. And he apologized to me and said, "This is not your fault." And then later that night, I heard him talking with my mom, and because she had gone back to working days now. So it was interesting how all of a sudden she's back working days. So that is another reason why I don't think that I was used physically. But I may have been, I don't know. But my dad, I heard them talking, so I sneaked down the hallway, and they're in the kitchen. And my dad said, I am glad that she locked the keys in the car because it would have blown up had she driven it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So they were trying to get rid of you guys.
Get rid of me. Yeah. They knew I drove the car because I drove it to Vandenberg Air Force Base for whenever. And even in my senior year, I remember getting a phone call, and it was like a Friday night or something. And my mom would work a double shift. My dad said, Gloria, one of your friends is on the phone. And I'm like, well, who would it be? So I answered the phone and was given a code word, and I hung up and I said, okay. And I looked at my dad and he goes, you can go. And I said, I can go, and hung up. Remember getting the car keys and driving to the Air Force Base.
So it's like you got an activation code over the phone, and without
Yes.
needing to know anything more than getting the code, you knew it was time to go to the base. And then your father.
I want to bring up something here. Anybody in the chat ever get one of those calls? It was more common about 10 or 20 years ago, or all of a sudden you just hear weird tones start playing on your phone. Anybody else get those calls? I think
Was
that's
it like a modem dial-up type thing, like a
yeah,
fax
kind
call,
of, but not always.
it's different?
But yeah, sometimes it's just like dee, doo, dee, like stuff like that. And yeah, they'll use tones like that, like both in person if they can, or through a phone call or whatever. Because I guess they figured out that that is more effective than the code words. Code words are still real; they're both real, but
The
I guess
tones are even better.
the tones activate more intensely and quickly and accurately, I guess would be a word for it.
Well, this was before the internet and smartphones and cell phones. So we're talking like 1973.
Yeah.
Right.
And
so some guy, like a voice on the phone, like some dude, like,
Mhm.
you know, he would say, like, the sparrow is red. And you'd be like, okay, time to go. And then your
yeah,
dad
because I think
said,
sometimes
fine, go for it. He wasn't like, where are you going? He was like, yep, that's the arrangement. Gloria's got to get in the car now.
I think that it usually works, but sometimes it doesn't. Like there's this movie, spoiler alert, it's called MKUltra. I'm not spoiling the whole movie, but there's this funny part in it where, because he's an asset, he hasn't figured it out, and he works at a gas station.
And he's a dweeby guy.
Yeah, and this lady's trying to help him figure it out and get him safe because there's like a certain group that's after him and they're trying to neutralize him. And like, but he's like totally, it's all over his head and he has no idea what's going on. So this lady tries to activate him and tells what's going on. So she says whatever code, she's like buying something. She's like, the red sparrow meets the nest or something like that. He's like, all right, that's 453, lady. And she's like, the red sparrow meets the nest. Or he's like, yeah, okay, that's 453 though. What does that mean? Is that from a movie or something? And she's just like, God, like that's. So I think that's like a depiction of a real thing. Is that like occasionally the programming doesn't work the way it's supposed to, and that's why I think they'll have the tones. And I've actually encountered it like we're in person. The lady was actually carrying like some sort of like Bluetooth speaker or something. I don't know what it was, but she had it on her and the tones came out of it, and then I altered out. So yeah, the code phrases and the tones, it could be one or the other. But yeah, they'll activate people and then they'll go do stuff. And I know that I've done stuff in the here and now too, I think, where I've like went out and done things. But through a lot of it is done through like portals and time travel to where they call us ghosts. And so technically you get rid of someone, you neutralize somebody in these programs. And if you were through time travel, they can make it that so that you were at the school dance at the same time. So therefore there's literally no way you could have done it, because by classical current standards, there's no such thing as time travel, and a person can't be in two places at once. So that's kind of how these programs operate in such secrecy, and they can do some really, that's just barely scratching the surface of what they're capable of. But I can say now in this that I've had some memories come back to you, Gloria. Are you familiar with the Hulk programs?
What are those?
They basically put you in a super duper huge muscular body that's pumped up with all sorts of drugs and steroids and stuff like that to make you go out in the battlefield and do stuff. And you're like as tall as a building, and you can like throw tanks and stuff like that, and just punch through walls and stuff like that, and you normally have psionic abilities and stuff like that go along with that. I remember, my memory of you is just seeing them make you into a Hulk, and seeing you go through the torture of it and the trauma, and it's like really brief. It's like I don't know. I just see your face, and I reckon you wouldn't look the same at all. But your face doesn't lie. It was
I
you.
don't have those memories at this time, but I do remember being in fatigues, flying on a chopper, and also being on Mars a couple of nights ago, where I was in a crater and there was like a floor safe. But no, I had always thought that had weird gears on the front and lettering, which looked like it was alien, of course it was, reptilians are there. And then another soldier jumped on top of the safe, and I looked up and he was looking outside the crater, because what we were doing was we were timing the satellites before we could get out of the crater, run across, and get back.
Well, you were timing the satellites?
Right. We didn't want to be picked up on the
If you have satellites flying overhead a crater
Oh.
and you want to run and you got to get to an objective, you don't want a satellite to pick you up while you're on top of the objective. You want to fly over, run out, deal with the objective, and then get back to the shadow of the side of the crater or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I'm guessing that I don't have the sense that we know each other extremely well or something yet, but I just know that I think that you were one of the people who was a pioneer of the Hulk programs, unfortunately, which is why I remember you being in such pain. I remember seeing your eyes, and just you were like strapped.
Do you remember what year that was? And then
time travel has made time totally irrelevant for me, and it's really hard for me to say where or when I was, but from what I can say is it feels old, feels 1950s, feels people still smoking cigarettes in normal everyday places, feels like that time period. So it feels like a long time ago.
That also puts up into the early 1960s. But go ahead. You see me in pain and what? I didn't mean to.
I think you were in the Hulk programs, and I think what they would do is like when you're talking, it was coming to me too when you're talking about the anger, how they'd use your anger, they'd get you angry. That's what they would do to you, is they'd get you wound up, get you angry, get you pissed off, and then they would send you out in the battle, and you would just be just destruction everywhere you go. Like and this is a thing that's there's been a few people who have talked about this. James Rink has talked about being in it. Veronica Bartolini has talked about being in it.
Susan Long.
So it's like a program where you're like the size of like a 2-story building, maybe a 3-story tall building. It could be smaller or bigger depending on the situation and what planet are you on or what do they want you to do. But they put you in these really muscular, heavily modified through tech and steroids and drugs and everything else body that can just plow through basically anything in battle and just fearless too. They have them programmed to be fearless.
Susan Long's recall is like being in one of those like Hulk program body avatar things, and on like a giant assembly line, like a GM car factory. She's like in this body on an assembly line.
I've seen those. Yeah. Like Elon Musk has one of those. He owns one of those.
And all these like technicians
like
are running up to her and plugging in hoses into her body and like pumping fluids into her or out of her. And she said she recalled it was like really painful and not fun. That's her recall.
I'm wondering if they took me from the future and took me back to, a different dimension or in the past, because I don't remember anything like that happening.
Yeah, it's that. Well, here's the thing that I've been saying. It's something that I really want to reiterate to everybody in this community. Is just because you don't remember something happening doesn't mean it didn't happen.
True.
These programs are designed to delete your memories, and for me personally, I have an emotional aptitude that most people don't have, maybe, and they can't delete my emotions. They can delete my memories, but they can never delete my emotions. And through my emotions, that's how I remember things. and that's how I get my memories back. And yeah, just because you don't remember being in a Hulk body or doing any of this stuff, or like, it doesn't mean that if you did QHHT and focused on that with your QHHT practitioner and went into that, you wouldn't find, oh, okay, I have been. Because I remember it. I remember just not being there in battle with you, but coming across you somewhere where they were programming you, and it being hard to watch because it was so brutal. It was so brutal what they were doing to you, and inhumane and wrong.
It's all part of the training. When you feel up to it, would you mind writing that to me in a message in Messenger, and I can add that to my book and say,
Yeah,
even
sure.
though I don't have this memory, I can say what you remembered and when you saw me and everything.
I'd love to do
around
that.
it.
I'd love to do that for you. I feel like it's
Thank
the
you.
least I could do.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot. We go through a lot in these programs, and so you said that you've been on Mars recently. Like, can you explain for you? Because I'll like admit to everybody in the audience and to you guys, like, it's confusing to me how it all works. Can you explain to you, like, what do you think it was? Do you think it was a memory that you got where your doppelganger clone of you is experiencing that at the same time, or do you think that, like, you got taken for a 20 and back, or what do you think? How do you think that works with the fact that you got that memory back a couple of days ago?
I think it was punishment from the program, from the SSP people, because I had already voluntarily been able to draw out of a simulation twice. Like, I was even able to stop a simulation in process. And Brian and I had spoken about this, where I saw the person talking into a microphone and saw him from the mouth down. And the ostriches and emus were walking around. And the minute I said, what am I doing here in my head? Why am I here? The simulation stopped. My thinking, it stopped.
When you talk about the ostriches and emus, are you talking about, like, the weird, like, Egyptian aliens?
No, this was like in an inside horse arena. And I think I had already voluntarily stopped one simulation. So I think they put me in it to analyze my brain function, to seeing if I could understand what might be real and what might not be, to question something weird happening. So these were like, you know, when you go to the arcades and you see those cards going across, and, you know, the one dimension, you're supposed to shoot them to hit them back. That's what this was like, with ostriches and emus. And it
They're like projections. They're like
Right.
projections in a holographic state, like a dream, but were sequence.
Similar to that, but they look like, when I stopped it, they look like the cards, and they stopped.
Or they look fake. You could tell they're artificial constructs.
And so the program handler also looked fake. And then before on my way out of the program, I saw him from this part down and to his throat. And then I woke up. So what they did was, I will look it up because I wrote it in my book yesterday, and I put it in an update. It's in most of my updates will be in chapter 9, because that will end up being like, that will be, because it will be my updates of what I go through, because that's the only chapter where I think it would fit in, where I start talking about the rest of it. And what happened was, I remember the next night that, here we go. Oops, I was in chapter 10. No wonder. Okay. And then I remember this happened on the 28th, that they put me in my sleep. They put me into a wind and rain tunnel simulation, and the wind was howling and the rain was beating down on me. And I'm thinking, I'm not getting wet, but I kept hitting me. You know, it's just similar to what they do with waterboarding, but it was just down on me. And I said the word out loud, no. And at the point of that, I was able to wake up. And then I thought, oh, I'm being punished and able to break out of their simulations. but I think they were putting me into another test to see if I could break out of that. And I remember after I went back to sleep, I was in a room with other people. And at first I thought it was the Galactic Federation. But as I was laying strapped down on a metal table, I'm thinking, well, this isn't the Galactic Federation. I wouldn't be strapped down on a table. And there were people in lab coats and black suits. They were walking around. And I thought, oh, this is part of the secret space program. And they've brought me somewhere. And then next thing I know, I went out. So I'm sure that they had me, given me more drugs. And then I got up. It was like 1 a.m. at that point. I had to use the facility. And then I went back to sleep. And then that's when I remember being in a foxhole in the crater with another super soldier. And that's about where it looked like a floor safe. And then I think I was sent to Mars because it was reddish brown sand. And I believe that's why I was sent there as part of punishment. I don't know. But then the next thing I know, I was waking up at 4:30 in the morning when the alarm went off. And I felt pretty good after the 3 things. So whatever they gave me helped me through my waking time and my waking hours, because I believe that they have found out since my head injury, which was given to me by the Greys for saying, I'm not writing this book, which was my journey as a Grey hybrid. And they had given me a year to reconsider, and I refused. So then I met with a head injury with no known causes. I should have been a quadriplegic from the neck down, and there were no fractures, no brain bleeds. My right hand was all swollen. And and I put it on ice that day after going to the ER. And even the ER doctor said, what happened? I said, I don't know. After the CAT scan, said there is no known reason why you needed to fall. And somebody had seen me, and he came over and said, are you okay? I said, yeah, he was out walking his husky. And he said, do you need help? I go, yeah, I just need help getting up. So I get up, put my duffel bag over my shoulder because I had been somewhere to a business. And I was walking back to the bus and ready to take it home. And I called my girlfriend at the time in Michigan. And I said, I just fell down. She goes, did you hit your head? I said, no, I hit my chin. And I landed on the duffel bag on my chest. She said, did you black out? I go, yeah. She goes, are you going to the hospital? Why? I'm going home. She said, Gloria, you probably have a head injury. And she talked me into going. I said, well, I need to catch the bus. I need to hang up. So I called my other girlfriend and said, can you take me to the hospital? And she said, yeah, I'm going to be right next to it. And that's when I got examined. But I think now they have found out that with the head injury, I have difficulty functioning at the beginning stages for a week and a half. And I had my dog at the time who I had to take out, and I could barely function. So it's been 4.5 years. And after my dog passed in April of this year, I started after the grieving part. I think during the grieving part, they would take me. But now that I believe that they've enhanced my brain healing through some things, that I'm able to do things more now than I was before.
So it's almost like when you break the leg of a sheep or whatever to stop it from running away and to get it to just stay in the pasture and do your bidding. It's almost like they not so nicely energy weaponed you or whatever to kind of nerf you and force you into the position of like, well, looks like I'm writing my book now.
Well, I couldn't at first. I had to learn to walk over again, learn to speak better. And my reading level went down from an adult down to 7-year-old, the 2nd grade reading level. And I called the behavioral health program I had been in to learn about healthy relationships, because I can tell you I didn't know what they were growing up, had to relearn red flags and boundaries. And through this, she said, walking is good, because when walking, typing, musical instrument, playing a piano, all of that uses both sides of the brain. Listening to classical music will use both sides of the brain. Well, I couldn't handle listening to music. I can to a point now, but not as much. And because my brain, I will still get overstimulated, but not as quickly as before. So I had to learn. I started out writing a children's book. And in the end of 2020, because I had my head injury February 10th of 2020. So in the fall, to get some of my skills back, I wrote a children's book. And then the following year, I wrote a crime fiction book because it was something that I wanted to get my supernatural psychic abilities back. And all of a sudden, I was thrown back into using my medium abilities, calling on spirits. And also with that, because I had selected listening to missing people, on podcasts where families are looking for a loved one. And I knew what happened on this one. And it was just like, well, that's weird. But then also on my news, my feed on Facebook, I was told one day, go there. And I looked at a picture of a friend of mine. It was a relative, actually. And I knew who killed her, or thought I knew who killed her, and everything, called the police. And I gave them all the information that I knew. So I knew I was back on the right track. And then once that was finished, then they're saying, you're writing the book. I said, well, I can write it in fiction form. They didn't say anything. They said, no, nonfiction. But I was writing it in fiction form because I didn't want to come out and come forward. And then it was August of 2022. And they said, you need to make this nonfiction or you're leaving the earth. You're leaving life as you know it.
Oh, boy. These guys don't play.
No, the Greys don't play. No, I'm here for a purpose. I signed a contract. So I went ahead and started writing it. And then I was in a documentary, and then I released in January of 23.
What documentary were you in?
It's called Encounters, the Complete Interviews with independent film director William Howard III.
Interesting.
It's on reveal.net. It's also on Tubi, and it's supposed to be free to watch. I know it's on Amazon Prime, but you have to pay to watch it. But it is up on Reveal. I was in season 2, the last 2 episodes. And then I started writing my second book about extraterrestrial, metaphysical, paranormal, and visionary. I have to do them in alphabetical order. Encounters, years 2022 and 2023. And then Mr. Grant Cameron interviewed me in the spring of this year and said, with the vast knowledge you have, because he read my first 2 books, and then he said, with the vast knowledge you have with my talking to you, you have more recall than anyone else I have interviewed. So why don't you write that information? And that's when my friend in New York said, Gloria, you need, because before he said, why don't you write it? I said, when I sit down, it's like I don't remember a lot, but then I started listening to past podcasts of what I had said, which will start bringing things to mind. And so I wrote the book, Disclosure from the Galactic Realm. And then right after that was when I wrote Abducted into Secret Space Programs and Black Ops. And I hope no more books are going to be required of me this year. I'm tired.
Well, can we speak to, this is a phenomenon that I and many others have noticed, that people who tend to have been inducted into the programs have a lot of psychic gifts and abilities. And then, here you are talking about like psychometry, where you're able to like pick up a photo and get psychic impressions and knowledge off of that, or, mediumship or telepathy, communications. So there's obviously maybe a particular faction of the Greys that you are contracted with, but then can you speak to any other beings or entities or groups that you may have communicated with?
Yes, because I've had my remote viewing and psychic abilities since I remember 3-4 years old. So I do remember when I was writing my journey as a Grey hybrid, the Pleiades came one night, And I remember being on their spaceship, and I was laying physically, I opened my eyes, and here was this Pleiadian holding my body, energy body, in their arms. And they had taken me for a healing and put me back together, because it was really weird how I could do both at the same time. And then the next night, and I've had that trip before, and this was the second time. And I put the pictures in, and I wrote about it in my second book, that I was taken aboard a spaceship, and I was in the hallway, and these are people say they're called Sasquatch. I call them Bigfoot, but the
Forest
Yeti.
people.
Yeah, but they're on a spaceship, and they're black with red glowing eyes, with long fingernails, all the fur, and they were pushing me down a hallway, pushing me to go. And then they were also coming from in front of me, so they stopped me at a certain point, and then the door to my right opened up, and they told me, go. I heard telepathically, go. And I went in, and I'm standing on the floor, and a black net starts to lower, and I grabbed onto it, and they were laughing because they dropped the floor out, and they were like floating in the air. And I was holding on to it, and that's when they were poking me and scratching me, and I woke up with puncture marks and scratches all over me. But I've also was, after I had seen the UFO when I was a child with a dismembered horse, the little green men, and these were not grays, these were green with really weird looking teeth, like with boils on their face, with long fingernails. They would move my bed, and they would come practically every night and move my bed, and I would get in trouble for moving a heavy bed that my mom couldn't even move it. And then the lady in white came and said, they won't bother you anymore. And that was the last time I saw them. But I've been in contact with like 21 other beings.
Types of beings.
Yeah, types of beings.
And it sounds like the positive and the negative, the ones that were like trolling you and maybe trying to shut you down and nerf you for whatever reason in the here and now, and then others who are more protecting you and fending them off. And then that sounds like a lot of people in the community, starseeds, light workers, get visited when we're younger by like shadow people, whatnot. And sometimes it scares the bejesus out of people, and it does shut them down. And other times it actually might scare them temporarily, but then it ignites a fire in them to find out more and sets them on a whole different course.
Yeah, I remember meeting the shadow beings in elementary school, and they were against, I'm walking, but at the time I was walking, my shadow was behind me, and they're on the wall to my left, and they're waving at me and everything and got my attention. And I would see them and thought, that's weird. And I would look to my right to see if anybody was standing there, not thinking at the time, not knowing the difference that the shadows from somebody to my right would be behind them and not to my left and in front of them. So and I've seen them on occasion, but they've never hurt me. And I've seen the Anunnaki look like men, dressed like men in black, standing in the middle.
Are they really tall and pale?
They were wearing like black suits. And they had the big eyes, which I thought at the time they were wearing goggles. They had a hat on. There were two of them, and they were in the middle of the street. But when the cars would come by, they would vanish out. Then when the car drove by, then they would they would materialize. And then I was walking my dog, and then behind me was a benevolent reptilian standing in the shadows. And at the time, I didn't realize they were there to protect me. And then I finished walking my dog, and we went back in, and they were gone. I said, if you're here to hurt me, go away. And they didn't. They stayed. But the reptilian, he vanished, but the Anunnaki was still in the street as I went back to walking her back into the apartment building.
Was a benevolent reptilian and the two Anunnaki men in black, were they working together to protect you, or are they at cross purposes, like the benevolent reptilian was protecting you from the men in black, or vice versa?
I don't know, because I didn't pick up any weird energy. It was all pleasant.
Okay, no hostility.
Yeah, there's no hostility, so they were probably both. And I think it was a message for me to be more aware of my surroundings, because it was not long after that a kidnapped from secret space tried to kidnap me when I was out walking my dog. So I think that was a message to be more aware.
Mm-hmm. Keep your eyes open so you can't just get grabbed up into a van,
right,
while walking your dog or whatnot.
Which that happens to people, and then they can make you forget that it even happened.
And Rocco Fowler talks about it. He talks about biking, like his little BMX dirt bike with a buddy when they were younger, in their young teenage years, and having like men in a white van just drive up, the door sides open, and he literally remembers being on his little dirt bike and getting grabbed up, him and his dirt bike and all, into the van, and then like waking up hours later in the woods, like missing clothing, missing his bike, and having like walk home.
Well, I don't know why they didn't bring a van, but what they started with was a guy my height, around my height, probably about 5'6", 5'7", if that, in a small car. And here I am using a walker, walking my dog. And I caught him, and a couple of times, and one time he went, and I just went, yeah, and I said, leave me alone. And I'm standing in front of the police department, which is not, you'd think, would be the safest place. This guy starts walking the middle of the street and went, no. And I picked up my phone, and he turned around and got back in his car. But he went around the block and parked behind me on the street, and I noticed it. And he was sitting at the corner by the stop sign. So I hit the light to be able to walk across the street to where the side of the street I live on, and there were 3 couples, probably in their early 30s. And I said, I need your help. And I pointed to him. I said, see that car? He's following me. So they walked me and my dog to the door, and to make sure I got safely inside. But I came, when I got into got up to the floor where I live, I looked out and the car was still there. And I thought, well, I'm going to get in the apartment and see, if it's still there when I get inside. And it was there for 2 hours. But then when I took my dog out next time, after it was gone, I took it out the back way.
And this is where I recommend everyone, like you did the exact right thing with your phone, camera phone right there, Gloria, is if you can, try to capture him on video, capture the car on video, get the license plate number, put it online. And they hate that. They hate having their cover blown, much less publicly blown, much less a photo of them. That's, if you can do that. I remember when Arkeem had that one Air Force car guy following him around, and he put that online. I thought that was great.
Well, he was far away enough I couldn't get the license plate. And people were turning around and looking at him. And I'm just like, leave me alone. So I made enough of a ruckus, which the FBI taught me when I worked for them. This is what you do.
Yep. Yell fire.
So do you actually work for them in the here and now, or was that?
Yep. After first year of college, I went to work for them at the J. Edgar Hoover building in Washington, D.C. on Pennsylvania Avenue for 13 months.
What was your job working for the FBI?
I had first, because I failed the shorthand test, that I was in a typing pool where you type on 3x5 index cards, information about people who come in, who commit crimes, all their pertinent information, and then you also put it on the back, and you had to meet a quota. But when the shorthand class opened up, because I tested ahead of time in my college shorthand and typing teacher, she went ahead with that. I applied because they had recruited us. I heard about them in my senior year of high school, but I didn't go then. And my parents tried to talk me into going. I think that was part of what I needed to do. And I said, I'm going to go to a year to college. I didn't feel comfortable with that, but I was also vetted to play for the Los Angeles Philharmonic Orchestra because I played flute, and they had a talent scout come at one of the recitals that we did, and he asked, and he gave me my parents the number of calling me. My dad made it to, I think my dad was told that she cannot go because my dad was saying, oh, just think that you and I can spend a weekend together alone in your apartment. Wouldn't that be great? And I had already known that what he was doing when my mom wasn't home, expecting me to give him sexual pleasure. And I didn't want any part of that. So I went work for the FBI. And yeah, my neck's hair's crawling, skin is crawling. But then I went ahead and tested, but I didn't pass the shorthand, which you had to go for 3 minutes at 120 words a minute taking dictation. I was able to do 110. So it took me a couple of months to get my dictating skills up. I would go to class. So then I was able to be, once I passed, I applied to go up into the Freedom of Information and Privacy Act, one floor up, and there was no quota. And that's where I worked for them for the remainder of the time. And the rest of that story is in my book, because I really don't want to make it too public right now, because right now the FBI is being really quiet, and it talks about what they do even now to their employees.
Okay, wow.
Yep.
That's
Yeah, there's a lot of juicy
that's a
content
good teaser
in here.
for the book. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a
It's
lot
on
of juicy
Amazon.
content in there.
Yeah, I'm ordering my book. It's in my cart, or it's already been ordered. So yeah.
Perfect. Is there any more of like your story that you'd like to kind of talk about while you're here, or?
Well, here for this episode before the next time you're back.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's it for now, because
Okay.
I really can't think of anything more. And we've had a lot to go on. And you've given me some food for thought for me to be able to digest. But this, I will leave with this morning. I remember being in a while back, friending somebody, and this was part of the program. And it wasn't, I don't know if it was a simulation, and I don't think I went there as a female. So I think what they did, it might have been a simulation for me to look different. But this husband and wife, he was in the program. He was supposed to be doing things, but he was renovating his house, which was a cabin style. And I went back early, it was early this morning, and I had to, and I'm not proud of what I was made to do unwillingly, but it's all part of the program and what the drugs they give you to do. Jimmied with his stairs, so he fell down them. And I told his wife to call 911. She said, why don't you? I said, no, I want to stay with him because I can't call on a 911 call. We're not to do that. I was trained not to do any of that type of thing.
They don't want your voice recorded.
Right. So I said, you call them and I will stay here. And so she went outside, called 911, and he looked at me. And I stood up, and we are trained to be able to beat someone to make it look like they fell downstairs. So I had to kick in the ribs and other places, knowing how he fell down the stairs even more. And he was in a semi-conscious state. So the paramedics came in, put the oxygen on him, put him on, after he was stabilized, put him on a gurney. And the man looked at me, he could tell. And he looked in my eyes, and he knew why I was there. And then they pulled me, the program pulled me out. But when I woke up and I stood up, it's like wearing a hoodie, and you pull the hood back, you can feel it, as you walk through the unveiling of that process. That is what I felt this morning. So I know that it was happening in the morning.
Like an altar came, your altar came like that.
Right. The altered
and it sounds like
personality.
they used you to go handle yet another poor asset, go beat up this asset, get them in line, while you're the Manchurian candidate doing the other side's doing their dirty work. Right.
And it took me a few hours to get into my semblance of mine. And I prayed, and I wanted to cry, but wasn't able to cry because of the altered personality. And I said, God, please forgive me. You
You
know,
felt bad. You kicked this dude while he was down because
Yeah.
they sent you. Yeah.
I had
So-
to jimmy the floor to hurt him, and that's not what I would do. He didn't hurt me in my waking life. He did not
Yeah,
threaten
he's a
my
fellow
life.
he's a fellow person victim to these same programs, and you're made
Right.
to victimize him. It's like like them sending him to victimize you, and he's under
Right.
programming. And there, I want to say in our comments here, a lot of folks who really empathize because they've probably been through similar. It looks like. And would you like them to reach out to you, Gloria? Because I know you and I have talked about this, expanding our networks and our community and supporting each other and being there. And I'm sure the people who've taken their good time to watch this interview and be here with us, would you like them to reach out to you online?
Yes, definitely. Definitely reach out to me. I think it's Gloria. Gloria.Hass.9. Let me bring it up and I can tell you. Exactly.
Gloria.Hass.9.
Yeah, it's Gloria.Hass.9, the number 9.
Is it a
No,
Gmail?
that's on Facebook, facebook.com.
Yeah. And if you find me, Brian Tseng the Silver Bee, maybe you have to be a friend of mine to be able to see Gloria, but you'll find her online.
Yep. You see my face.
Yep. So
All
please
right,
message
well,
Gloria.
Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Yes.
And it's been really great talking to you. I'm going to kick you guys off the stage. And
I
thank you,
love
everybody, for tuning in. We really appreciate
Thank
you so
you.
much. This information is really important, and we really appreciate everybody giving your ears to it. And I'm going to run a little ad at the end of this, but yeah, thanks for tuning in, everybody.
Thank you so much, everyone. I truly appreciate it, and I'm happy to be here for you.
All right, see you guys later. Sorry, I kicked you off a little fast. Okay, like I said, I'm going to show you guys something here, and then I'm going to end the show.
This is an introduction to the Patreon of Arkhim Ra. Arkhim is a time traveler from an alternate reality. He is a survivor of brutal MKUltra mind control programming and was turned into a psychic weapon by the United States military. After narrowly surviving and barely escaping with his psyche intact, it has become his mission to expose clandestine programs which harm children and steal lifetimes from people for the purpose of slavery. This slavery is manufactured through the means of cloning, time travel, and consciousness transferal. Contributing to the unraveling of the truth and helping others understand their own experiences related to MKUltra programs and secret off-world colonies is a monumentally challenging task which takes hours upon hours of work and research to properly execute. This Patreon serves as an outlet for those who wish to support Arkhim and ensure that he is able to continue his work as a disclosure whistleblower and organizer full-time. By subscribing to Arkhim's Patreon, you will receive exclusive content including a weekly breakdown of an MKUltra related music video, a weekly update on world affairs and Arkhim's life, as well as an exclusive presentation every month. If you choose the second tier, you are also able to participate in a bi-weekly Zoom call with Arkhim. Arkhim will also be uploading at least one original song or cover weekly. Ark is also available for private consultation for a suggested donation which can be negotiated. No one in need will be turned away. Thank you for your attention to these important topics, and welcome.